The grand hall of Hayes Development Tower shimmered under crystal chandeliers, their light catching champagne flutes and designer gowns like captured starlight. Christmas Eve had transformed the marble lobby into something out of a corporate fairy tale. White pine garlands wound up columns, the scent of cinnamon and evergreen mingling with expensive perfume. Employees clustered in groups, their laughter bouncing off 20-foot ceilings while a jazz quartet played standards near the executive elevators. James Cooper moved through the crowd like a ghost, his gray maintenance uniform faded from too many industrial washes. 38 years had carved lines around his eyes, the kind that came from squinting at broken HVAC systems and raising a daughter alone. His calloused hands bore traces of pipe grease he'd scrubbed 3 times before leaving the basement workshop. Most people's gazes slid past him, seeing the uniform but not the man wearing it. Mia clung to his hand, her 8-year-old frame practically vibrating with wonder. Dark curls bounced as she tugged him toward the dessert table, brown eyes wide at the chocolate fountain cascading in 3 tiers. She wore a navy dress James had found at Goodwill last week, pressed carefully with the iron that sometimes sparked. The fabric was good quality. Someone else's daughter had outgrown it, and Mia didn't know the difference. His chest tightened, watching her reach for a strawberry, the simple joy on her face worth every double shift he'd pulled this month. 3 years since Sarah died. 3 years of learning to braid hair from YouTube videos and burning frozen pizzas and holding Mia while she cried for her mother at 2 in the morning. The grief had dulled to a constant ache, like the throb in his right hand when cold weather set in. Across the lobby, Catherine Hayes stood on the mezzanine level, surveying her domain with practiced composure. At 36, she'd built her father's struggling real estate firm into Hayes Development Group, an $800 million juggernaut that owned 40% of Cleveland's revitalized waterfront. Her honey blonde hair fell in soft waves past her shoulders, and the crimson dress she wore, a bold V-neck that demanded attention without apology, made her impossible to miss. But her eyes stopped people cold. Ice blue and calculating, they measured every person, every angle, every potential weakness or opportunity. The business press called her the Ice Queen of Cleveland. Her competitors called her ruthless. No one called her soft. Lisa Chen appeared at her elbow with a tablet, her efficient smile barely masking exhaustion. The assistant had worked 16-hour days for 3 weeks coordinating this party. The Q4 numbers look strong. Riverside acquisition closed this morning. Board's pleased. Catherine barely glanced at the screen. They should be. We came in under budget and ahead of schedule. Lisa hesitated, venturing into territory she knew was forbidden. Boss, when's the last time you actually enjoyed one of these parties? You know, talked to people instead of analyzing them. Catherine's expression could have frozen the champagne fountain. I don't pay you to manage my feelings, Lisa. I pay you to manage my schedule. The younger woman retreated with practiced grace, already pulling up tomorrow's agenda on her tablet. Catherine returned her attention to the crowd below, watching her employees laugh and drink and pretend they weren't terrified of her. Good. Fear kept people sharp, kept them from getting comfortable enough to make mistakes. Yet beneath the armor of her designer wardrobe and cutting boardroom reputation, Catherine carried a wound that had never fully healed. 18 years ago, when she was 18 and still believed in fairy tales, she'd fallen in love with a boy named Michael Bennett. He was a piano prodigy, all wild dark hair and passionate eyes, the kind of talent that made you forget to breathe when he played. He'd written her a song, just for her. He called it Embers and Stars, and played it for her one night under a sky full of constellations at their summer music camp in the Berkshires, whispering that it held everything he felt but couldn't say in words. 3 weeks later, Michael died in a car accident on Route 90, his Honda flipping 4 times in the rain before wrapping around a guardrail. Catherine never heard the song played again. She'd forbidden herself from listening to music the way she once had, treating it instead as background noise, afraid that if she let herself feel too deeply, the grief would swallow her whole. Mia's bright voice cut through Catherine's thoughts. The child had wandered from her father's side and now stood near the dessert table, reaching for a chocolate-covered strawberry just beyond her grasp. As she stretched on tiptoes, her foot slipped on something wet. Champagne, probably spilled by a careless guest. She went down hard, her knee cracking against the marble floor. The sound was small but sharp. Immediately, Mia's face crumpled. Blood seeped through her white tights, darkening the fabric. James was across the room in seconds, dropping to his knees beside his daughter. He pulled a clean handkerchief from his pocket. He always carried one for moments like this, and pressed it gently to her scraped knee. His voice was low and soothing, the kind of voice that could calm storms. "Hey, sweetheart, Daddy's got you. You're okay. Just a little scrape. We'll fix it." Mia's sobs quieted to hiccups as he held her, his broad hand cradling the back of her head. But before James could lift her to carry her to the restroom, a man's voice sliced through the moment like glass. "Can you control your child?" Bradley Morrison strode over, his tailored navy suit immaculate, his jaw tight with irritation. 39 and handsome in a catalog model way, with perfectly styled chestnut hair and a smile that never quite reached his eyes. He worked in private equity and spoke frequently about optimizing assets and maximizing shareholder value in a tone that made it clear he viewed most things, including people, as items on a spreadsheet. "This is a corporate event, not a daycare." Bradley gestured at the small smear of blood on the floor, his Ferragamo shoes stepping carefully around it. "If you can't afford a babysitter, maybe you shouldn't have brought her." James's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice level, years of swallowing humiliation making the words smooth. "She's 8. She slipped. It was an accident. An accident that wouldn't have happened if you knew your place." Bradley's eyes raked over James's work clothes with undisguised contempt. "Your maintenance. There's a staff entrance for a reason." Mia's bottom lip trembled, and something in James's chest cracked. He opened his mouth to respond, but another voice cut in first. Catherine descended the mezzanine stairs with deliberate grace, each step measured and purposeful. When she reached them, her winter blue gaze fixed on Bradley with a coldness that could frost windows. "You don't have the authority to speak to my employees that way." Her tone was quiet, but allowed no room for negotiation. "Apologize." The lobby had gone silent, everyone watching. Bradley's face flushed, embarrassment warring with arrogance. "Catherine, I was just— Apologize! Now!" Bradley's lips pressed into a thin line, but he managed a clipped apology directed more at the floor than at James or Mia. Catherine turned to James then, and for just a moment, her expression softened. She saw the way he held his daughter, the care in his touch, the protective fury barely restrained in his shoulders. "In my building, we don't measure people's worth by their job title." Her voice carried across the lobby. "We measure them by their character. And right now, Mr. Morrison, yours is seriously lacking." She looked back at James, and something flickered in her eyes. Recognition, though she couldn't name why. "Take care of your daughter. First aid kits in the executive lounge, 5th floor. Take the private elevator." She gestured toward the brass doors behind her desk. James nodded, his throat too tight for words, and carried Mia away. Bradley stood there for a moment, jaw working, before stalking off toward the bar. Catherine watched the father and daughter disappear into the elevator, something about the scene unsettling her. Not the confrontation with Bradley, that was routine, but the way James had held Mia. Gentle, but unbreakable. The kind of love that would burn down the world to keep a child safe. It reminded her of something. Someone. From a lifetime ago. By the time James and Mia returned an hour later, Mia's knee properly bandaged and her spirits restored by the hot chocolate and cookies Lisa Chen had provided, the party had grown louder. Someone had opened the piano, a vintage Steinway that usually sat covered and silent in the corner, more decorative than functional. A few employees had gathered around it, laughing and requesting songs from a tipsy accountant who knew 3 chords and played them with more enthusiasm than skill. The off-key rendition of Jingle Bell Rock made James wince. Mia tugged his sleeve, her voice drowsy.
"Daddy, can you play? Please. Just one song so I can sleep."
James hesitated. He hadn't played publicly in years, not since the accident, not since Cleveland, not since the night that shattered more than his hand. The memories came unbidden. Stage lights, groaning metal, a young cellist who didn't see death swinging toward her head, his hand catching in the falling truss, bones pulverizing under half a ton of equipment that some cost-cutting executive had approved despite safety violations. He'd saved her life and destroyed his own in the same instant. 3 surgeries later, the doctor delivered the verdict with clinical detachment. "You'll never play professionally again. The nerve damage is too extensive." But Mia's eyes were so hopeful. And it was Christmas Eve, and she'd been so brave about her scraped knee. How could he say no? He sat down at the piano. The crowd quieted, curiosity replacing their chatter. His fingers hovered over the keys for a moment, trembling slightly. The scars across his right palm caught the light, spiderweb patterns where surgical steel had tried and failed to completely restore what had been crushed. James began with a single note, middle C, clear and pure. Then another. His left hand moved with the fluid grace he'd never lost, while his right hand followed more slowly, carefully. The melody that filled the hall was unlike anything most of them had ever heard. It started gentle, like rain on glass. Each note placed with such precision and care that it felt less like music and more like a conversation whispered in the dark. Then it grew, swelling into something achingly beautiful, a cascade of sound that spoke of longing and loss and a love so deep it had no words. James's eyes closed as he played, the damaged tissue moving with a grace that defied its injury. He played from memory, from the marrow of his bones. Every note was a piece of his heart laid bare. The song was Embers and Stars, though no one in the room except James knew its name. He had written it 18 years ago for a girl who never knew he existed, a girl with honey blonde hair and eyes like winter sky, a girl he'd loved from the shadows of a summer music camp, too poor and ashamed to speak to her, too certain she belonged with someone better. Someone like Michael Bennett, the confident prodigy who had everything James lacked. Michael had been his friend, the only person at that camp who treated the scholarship kid like an equal. When Michael struggled to finish a song he'd started for Catherine, James had offered to help, had poured everything he felt into those notes because words had always failed him, had given it away to someone who could deliver it because that's what you did when you loved someone from the shadows. You gave them pieces of yourself and never asked for credit. Catherine had been preparing to leave when the music reached her. She froze mid-step on the mezzanine, her hand gripping the brass railing so hard her knuckles turned white. The melody wrapped around her like a ghost, pulling her back through 18 years to a summer night when the stars seemed close enough to touch. She was 18 again, sitting on that dock at the Berkshire's music camp, Michael beside her with his wild confidence and electric smile. His fingers dancing over portable keyboard keys, his voice soft with emotion as he played this exact song, every note, every pause, every aching phrase. I'm calling it Embers and Stars. It holds everything I feel but can't say, everything I want to give you but don't have words for. She'd cried then, happy tears, and kissed him under those impossible stars. 3 weeks later, police officers stood on her parents' doorstep with the worst news a person could receive. "Miss Hayes, there's been an accident. Michael Bennett was pronounced dead at the scene. We're so sorry for your loss." The song had become her lifeline in the years that followed, the last piece of Michael she had left. She'd forbidden herself from seeking out recordings. There were none anyway. But she played it in her head during board meetings when her father demanded she be ruthless, hummed it under her breath in empty apartments when the loneliness threatened to consume her. Let it remind her that once, briefly, she had been loved for who she was, rather than what she could provide. But now someone else was playing it. Every note, every pause, every aching phrase exactly as Michael had played it that night. Catherine's vision blurred, her chest constricted, each breath a labor. Around her, guests murmured appreciation, oblivious to the fact that the ground beneath her feet had just shattered. How? How could this stranger, this maintenance worker, know Michael's song? She descended the stairs on unsteady legs, drawn to the piano as if magnetized. James finished the song and opened his eyes to find the CEO standing 3 feet away, her face pale, those distinctive eyes swimming with unshed tears. "Where did you learn that?" Her voice came out raw, barely above a whisper. James stood slowly, his heart hammering against his ribs. He'd known this moment might come someday, had dreaded it, and longed for it in equal measure. "It's just an old melody. Something I picked up years ago." "Don't lie to me." Catherine's voice sharpened, desperation creeping into her tone. She stepped closer, searching his face for answers he wasn't ready to give. "That song was written for me by someone who died 18 years ago. No one else knew it. No one could have known it." She paused, nails digging into her palms. "Who are you?" Before James could respond, Mia appeared at his side, sleepy and smiling, oblivious to the tension crackling between the adults. "That was beautiful, Daddy. Can we go home now?" Catherine's gaze dropped to the child, then back to James. She saw the fear in his eyes, the way he instinctively moved to shield his daughter from her intensity. She forced herself to breathe, to step back, to remember where she was and who was watching. But as James gathered Mia's coat and hurried toward the exit, Catherine stood rooted to the spot, the melody still echoing in her skull like a hymn or a curse. The next morning, Catherine arrived at the office 2 hours early, her eyes shadowed from lack of sleep. She pulled James Cooper's employee file and spread it across her desk. The information was sparse, almost deliberately so. Hired 3 years ago as maintenance staff. No college degree listed. Previous employment, warehouse work, grocery store, odd jobs. Emergency contact, Mia Cooper, age 8, daughter. No mention of a wife or partner currently, and nothing, absolutely nothing about music. Catherine picked up her phone and dialed a number she hadn't called in over a decade. The line rang 4 times before a familiar voice answered, rough with age but still warm. "Catherine, is that really you?" Dr. Thomas Wright had been Michael's mentor at the Cleveland Conservatory, the professor who'd recognized genius in a 17-year-old with more passion than discipline. "I need to see you, today. It's about Michael Bennett." There was a long pause on the other end, the kind of silence that carried weight. "I'll come to your office. Give me 4 hours." He arrived that afternoon, a lean man in his late 50s with silver-streaked hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Catherine hadn't spoken to Dr. Wright since the funeral. Couldn't bear to be around anyone who reminded her of what she'd lost. But when she called, he came without question. She played him a recording she'd found online,
Someone had filmed James playing last night on their phone and posted it to a private group for Hayes Development employees. The video quality was poor, the audio tinny, but the melody came through clear enough. Dr. Wright listened in silence, his expression unreadable.
When the video ended, he removed his glasses and rubbed his eyes with thumb and forefinger, suddenly looking every one of his 60 years. That's remarkable. Is it Embers and Stars? Michael's song? Dr. Wright hesitated, and in that hesitation, Catherine saw the weight of secrets kept too long. It's the same melody, yes, but Catherine, I need to tell you something. Something I should have told you 18 years ago, but I didn't because I thought it would hurt you more than help. Catherine's pulse quickened. Every instinct screamed that she didn't want to hear what came next, but she couldn't look away. Michael didn't finish that song. The words landed like a physical blow. That's impossible. I heard him play it. You heard him play the opening, the first 8 bars. He wrote those, and they were brilliant. He always was. But he got stuck. Couldn't figure out where to take it. He was frustrated, kept scrapping versions, starting over. I watched him torture himself over it for 2 weeks at that camp. Dr. Wright paused, choosing his words with the care of a man who understood their power to destroy. There was another student that summer. Quiet kid, talented but overlooked. From a poor family, scholarship case. Michael asked him for help. The other student took Michael's opening and completed it. Turned those 8 bars into something extraordinary. But then Michael died, and the song became his legacy. I never corrected the record because I thought it would dishonor Michael's memory. He was my star pupil. Admitting he hadn't finished his masterpiece felt like diminishing him somehow. Who was the other student? I don't remember his name. It's been so long, and I taught hundreds of kids over those years. He didn't fight for credit. When Michael died, he just disappeared. Didn't return to camp the following summer. I assumed he'd given up music entirely. Wright looked at the frozen frame of the video on her laptop screen. James's face illuminated by the piano's reading light, eyes closed in something that looked like prayer or penance. But if I had to guess, based on the way he plays, the technique mixed with that kind of emotional depth, it could be him. This James Cooper. Catherine felt the room tilt. There's only one way to find out for certain. Ask him. But when Catherine tried, she discovered James Cooper had vanished. She called down to the maintenance department as soon as Dr. Wright left. Is James Cooper working today? The supervisor sounded confused. No, ma'am. He called in sick this morning. First time in 3 years he's ever missed a shift. What about tomorrow? He requested personal days through the end of the week. Didn't say why, but he sounded stressed. Said it was a family matter. I need his address. She sent Tom Morrison, her head of security, a former Marine with kind eyes and discretion she trusted, to check on James. Tom returned an hour later with news that made her blood run cold. Boss, I went to the address on file. The landlord says Cooper and his daughter moved out 4 days ago. Paid rent through the end of the month but left no forwarding address. Wouldn't say where they were going. 4 days. Before the party. Before she'd confronted him. Did anyone see them leave? Neighbor across the hall said they left around 6 a.m. The little girl was crying. Cooper told her they were going on an adventure, but the neighbor said he looked scared, like he was running from something. Catherine felt panic claw at her chest. She'd driven him away. Her questions, her intensity, her desperate need for answers had frightened him off. But why? What was he hiding? Or more accurately, what was he protecting?
She spent the next 2 weeks consumed by the search.
Hired a private investigator who found nothing. James Cooper seemed to have vanished completely. No credit card charges, no cell phone pings, no trace of him or Mia anywhere in Ohio or the surrounding states. Meanwhile, the rest of her carefully constructed life began to fracture. Bradley grew increasingly insistent about wedding plans, showing up at her office with seating charts and menu tastings she had no interest in. The merger between Hayes Development and his investment firm was scheduled to close in mid-February, 2 weeks after their wedding. Her father called daily from his retirement condo in Boca Raton to ensure she wasn't jeopardizing the deal with cold feet. But Catherine couldn't focus on any of it. Her mind kept returning to that moment when James's fingers touched the piano keys and 18 years collapsed into nothing. The cruelest thing about losing someone isn't that they're gone. She whispered the words to herself late one night, standing at her penthouse window overlooking the city. It's discovering you never really knew them at all. Michael had secrets she never knew, a collaboration he never mentioned, a song that wasn't entirely his own. And now this stranger carried the truth of it in scarred hands and wouldn't stay still long enough for her to understand why. 2 weeks after James disappeared, on a night when snow fell thick and heavy, blanketing Cleveland in white silence, Catherine was about to leave the office when she heard it again. Piano music drifting up from the lobby. She didn't call for the elevator, ran down the stairs instead, heels clicking on marble, breath coming too fast, afraid that if she moved too slowly, he would vanish again like smoke. The lobby was empty except for a single figure seated at the piano. James. His back was to her, shoulders hunched as if bearing an invisible weight. He played Embers and Stars again, but this time it sounded different, sadder, more resigned, like a man saying goodbye to something he'd loved too long from too far away. "You came back," her voice echoed in the empty space. James's hands stilled on the keys. He didn't turn around, and when he spoke, his voice carried the exhaustion of a man who'd run out of places to hide. "I shouldn't have left. Mia asked me why we disappeared. I couldn't give her a good answer. She liked it here. Liked the cookies Lisa gave her, liked watching the lights, liked that nice lady CEO who let us use the fancy elevator." He finally turned, and Catherine saw the toll the past 2 weeks had taken. Dark circles under his eyes, a tightness around his mouth that spoke of too little sleep and too much worry. Mia was curled up on a nearby sofa, sleeping peacefully under James's jacket. "I owed you the truth, even if you hate me for it." Catherine moved closer, her footsteps careful on the marble. "I could never hate you for playing beautifully. But I need to understand. That song, Embers and Stars, Michael Bennett was supposed to have written it for me before he died. But Dr. Wright told me Michael didn't finish it. Someone else did." She stopped directly in front of him. "Was it you?" James stood slowly, his movements deliberate. Up close, Catherine could see the silver threaded through his hair, the calluses on his hands from years of manual labor, the way his right hand trembled slightly even when at rest. But his eyes, gray-green and achingly honest, held hers without flinching. "Yes, it was me." Catherine's knees nearly buckled. She gripped the edge of the piano to steady herself. "Why? Why would you do that? Why would you let him take credit?" James stepped back from the piano, creating distance. His voice carried the weight of 18 years of silence. "Because he loved you, and I was nobody. Just some kid who played because he had to, not because he was destined for greatness like Michael. I was at that camp on a scholarship I could barely afford. My dad died when I was 15. He was a mechanic,
died under a Chevy when the jack failed. My mom cleaned houses, worked herself to exhaustion for families who looked through her like furniture. His hands clenched at his sides. I was 20 years old, working nights washing dishes at a diner just to afford bus fare to camp and back. 52 hours a week, scrubbing pots and mopping floors so I could spend my days pretending I belonged with kids whose parents wrote checks without blinking.
I played piano because it was the only time I felt like I mattered.
Catherine's throat constricted, but she stayed silent, letting him unravel. And then I saw you. You probably don't remember. Why would you? I was invisible. But I watched you laugh with Michael. Watched the way your eyes lit up when he played. And I thought, that's what love looks like. His laugh came out bitter. I wanted to give you something, even if you never knew it came from me. So when Michael asked for help finishing the song, when he admitted he'd hit a wall and couldn't figure out where to take it, I wrote the rest for you. Poured everything I felt into those notes because words always failed me. Give it to Michael to play for you because that's what you do when you love someone from the shadows. You give them pieces of yourself and never ask for anything back. So you wrote a love song for another man to give to me. I wrote a love song for you. Michael just delivered it.
He knew I had feelings I couldn't express. He wasn't cruel about it.
He offered to tell you the truth, said you deserved to know who really wrote it. But I said no. I told him you were meant for someone like him, someone brilliant and confident and whole. Not someone like me who'd never be anything more than the guy washing dishes in the back. And then he died. And then he died. James echoed, his voice breaking. And I let the song be his legacy because it made you happy, because it gave you something to hold on to. And I went home to Youngstown and tried to forget I'd ever been anyone other than what I was always supposed to be. Catherine's tears came then, hot and unchecked. The man she'd mourned for 18 years hadn't written the song that saved her. A stranger had. A boy who loved her from the shadows and gave away his heart without ever expecting anything in return. What happened to you? Dr. Wright said you were talented.
Why are you fixing pipes instead of playing concert halls?
James held up his right hand, turning it so she could see the scars that webbed across his palm and up his wrist. The damaged tissue caught the light from the Christmas decorations still strung around the lobby. 6 years after that summer, I signed a contract with a performance company. Sterling Productions, your father's company before he rebranded it as Hayes Development. It was supposed to be my big break. Regional concert series, 20 cities across the Midwest. My name on posters for the first time in my life. $280,000 over 18 months. Catherine felt ice crawl up her spine. Opening night, Cleveland. I got there early for rehearsal. Stage crew was setting up rigging for lights, big metal trusses, maybe half a ton of equipment. I was walking past when I heard this crack, like a rifle shot. Metal fatigue. The whole truss started to fall. His eyes went distant.
There was a cellist right under it. Young woman, maybe 19. Juilliard student, first professional gig. She didn't see it coming. I shoved her out of the way, got my hand caught in the rigging when it came down. His voice went flat. They said later the bones were pulverized, like crushing an egg in your fist. 14 fractures, 3 severed tendons, nerve damage they couldn't fully map. 3 surgeries couldn't fix it completely. The hand works. I can grip things, do manual labor, even play piano if I'm careful. But the precision is gone. The speed, the dynamics, the ability to make the instrument sing instead of just speak. Gone.
The investigation concluded it was cost-cutting gone wrong. Someone approved substandard equipment to improve profit margins. Your father's company settled quietly with everyone involved. I got $75,000 to cover medical bills and sign an NDA promising not to talk about what happened.
How much were the medical bills? 68,000. 3 surgeries. 8 months of physical therapy. The other 7,000 went to rent while I couldn't work. Catherine felt bile rise in her throat. So I learned to fix the things that break. Seemed fitting, don't you think? The broken pianist fixing broken pipes. The silence stretched between them. Catherine's entire empire had been built on the foundation of her father's ruthlessness. Did you know? When you took this job here, did you know who I was? Not at first. I needed work after Sarah died, my wife, Mia's mother. Any work that came with real health insurance. After the accident, no one would hire me for music. I was damaged goods. So I learned plumbing, electrical, HVAC repair, whatever kept food on the table. His voice dropped. But then Sarah got sick. Stage 3 breast cancer, aggressive. We met 3 years after my accident. She was a nurse, actually treated one of my post-op infections. She knew my story, the whole ugly truth of it, and married me anyway. Told me she didn't care that I'd never be a famous pianist. Said she loved the man I was, not the man I could have been. When the cancer came, I would have done anything for treatment that worked. We had insurance through her hospital job, but it barely covered half. I worked 3 jobs for 2 years while she went through chemo and radiation. And she died anyway. Catherine felt her chest cave in. She died in our apartment, in our bed with Mia asleep in the chair beside her because our girl wouldn't leave her mother's side. Sarah made me promise to keep music in Mia's life, to not let my bitterness about the accident poison our daughter's chance to love what I'd lost. His voice cracked. So when I saw the job posting for Hayes Development 3 years ago, I applied. Good pay, excellent benefits, health insurance that actually covered things. I didn't make the connection to Sterling Productions at first. Different subsidiary, different name on the paperwork. But then I got here and saw your name on the directory, Catherine Hayes. And I wondered if you were related to Robert Hayes. And then I saw you, and I knew. Same eyes, same way of standing like you own every room you're in. I thought about quitting that first week, but I didn't, because seeing you from a distance was better than not seeing you at all. Catherine moved without thinking, closing the distance between them. Her hand reached for his damaged one, lifting it gently. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for what my father did to you. You didn't do it. I benefited from it. This building, this company, everything I've built. It's all standing on a foundation of people like you. People my father crushed and paid off and forgot about. I never looked. Never asked about the bodies buried in the basement of Sterling Productions. James pulled his hand back gently. You're not responsible for your father's sins. Aren't I? I took over his company, expanded it, made it more profitable, all while benefiting from the money he made destroying lives. His voice softened. But Catherine, whatever your father did, you are not him. The way you handled Mia at the party, the way you stood up to Bradley Morrison, the way you're standing here now, letting your heart break over something you didn't cause. That's not him. That's you. The kindness in his words undid her. Catherine sank onto the piano bench, shoulders shaking with sobs she'd held back for 2 weeks, for 18 years. All the grief and guilt and loneliness she'd armored herself against came pouring out. James hesitated for only a moment before sitting beside her,
careful to leave space between them. He didn't touch her, didn't offer platitudes. He just sat there in solidarity while she fell apart. When the worst of it passed, Catherine wiped her eyes with shaking hands.
I need to know something. If I asked you to give me a chance, to let me know you, really know you, would you be brave enough to say yes? Even though I come with all this baggage, even though my father destroyed you. James's eyes shone with something that looked like hope and terror in equal measure. I wrote you a love song 18 years ago and never told you. I think I can manage a little courage now. Catherine laughed, the sound breaking through tears. Good, because I'm terrified, and I could use someone who knows what it's like to start over from nothing. But their fragile moments shattered when Catherine's phone buzzed with an email notification. She glanced at the screen, then froze. The sender was Bradley Morrison. The subject line read simply, "We need to talk. Tomorrow. My office." The attachment was a PDF, financial documents, spreadsheets with highlighted cells, account numbers she didn't recognize. Catherine's trained eye caught discrepancies immediately. Shell companies in the Cayman Islands. Wire transfers routed through banks she'd never authorized. What is it? I think Bradley's in trouble. And I think he's about to try to make it my problem. The next morning, Catherine arrived at her office before dawn. She'd barely slept, her mind churning through the documents Bradley had sent. Lisa Chen found her 3 hours later surrounded by printouts and empty coffee cups. "Boss, you look like hell." Bradley Morrison has been embezzling from his own firm. $42 million over 18 months, hidden through offshore accounts and falsified reports. The merger isn't about creating a powerhouse. It's about giving him access to our accounts to hide his theft before his investors notice the money's gone. Lisa's professional mask slipped. "You're sure?" Catherine gestured at the evidence spread across her desk. "He sent me these last night." I think he's trying to threaten me, showing me he has dirt that could look bad for Hayes Development. But he's not as smart as he thinks he is. He just gave me everything I need to bury him. What are you going to do? I'm calling off the wedding, terminating the merger, and reporting him to the SEC. The board will fight you. Your father will lose his mind. Bradley will retaliate. I know, but I'm done making decisions based on what's easy or profitable or what my father would approve of. James Cooper lost everything because my father cut costs. I've spent my whole career telling myself I'm better than Robert Hayes, but I've been running his playbook without questioning it. That ends now. Lisa studied her boss for a long moment, then nodded once, sharp, decisive, loyal. What do you need me to do? Pull every financial document related to the Morrison merger, every wire transfer, every approval, every email. And do it quietly. Lisa left without another word. Catherine turned back to her computer. But before she could dive deeper, her office door burst open. Bradley Morrison strode in, 2 lawyers flanking him. Expensive suits, leather briefcases. You got my email. I assume you understand what it means. Catherine set down her pen with deliberate care. I understand you've been stealing from your investors and you're desperate enough to try blackmail. What I don't understand is why you'd be stupid enough to send me the evidence. The taller lawyer stepped forward. Ms. Hayes, we've been retained to address concerns about Hayes Development's leadership stability. Recent behavioral patterns suggest decision-making compromised by inappropriate personal attachments that could jeopardize shareholder value. Catherine felt cold fury crystallize in her chest. This was an ambush, carefully orchestrated. Let me save us all some time. Catherine moved to her desk, pulled out the flash drive Lisa had prepared, and connected it to her computer. The conference room screen flickered to life with spreadsheets, wire transfers, shell company registrations. This is Bradley Morrison's financial activity over the past 18 months. $42 million embezzled from his own firm and hidden through offshore accounts. The merger he's pushing isn't about business synergy. It's about gaining access to my company's funds to cover his theft. The lawyers exchanged glances. Bradley's face went white, then red. That's a lie. Those are legitimate consulting fees and international investment vehicles. I have emails. Communications between you and your offshore accountants discussing how to disguise fund transfers. Spreadsheets showing your firm's real asset values versus what you reported to investors. The SEC will have a field day with this. The shorter lawyer moved closer to examine the screen. Catherine saw the exact moment he realized the evidence was genuine. Mr. Morrison, are these documents authentic? Bradley's jaw worked silently. Even if they are, you've already committed to this merger. The board approved it. Your father endorsed it. Breaking the engagement now would tank our stock prices. Then they can sue. Because I'm not marrying a criminal to save face. You're not breaking this engagement because of my finances. Bradley's control snapped. You're doing it because you've developed feelings for that pathetic janitor who's been playing piano in your lobby. His name is James Cooper, and yes, I care about him. But that's irrelevant to your embezzlement. You stole $42 million. Those are the facts that matter. It's completely relevant. You're making emotional decisions that will destroy this company. Throwing away a strategic partnership because some blue-collar worker played you a pretty song. Weak is stealing from your own investors. Weak is trying to blackmail your way into a marriage. I'm done being polite about this, Bradley. Get out of my building. The taller lawyer intervened. Perhaps we should table this discussion. Mr. Morrison, I think we need to consult privately. But Bradley wasn't listening. He pulled out his phone, fingers moving rapidly. If you won't see reason, maybe public pressure will help. I'm sending these photos to the business press right now. You and James Cooper having intimate conversations. Let's see how the board reacts. Catherine's phone buzzed, not with Bradley's photos, but with an incoming call. Robert Hayes. She answered on speaker. Father. Catherine, what the hell did you do? Bradley just sent me photos of you with that maintenance worker. He's threatening to leak them unless you honor the merger terms. I'm on a plane from Boca right now. The engagement is over. The merger is canceled. Bradley Morrison is a thief, and I'm turning evidence of his fraud over to the SEC. You will do no such thing. The Morrison merger is too important to abandon over some financial irregularities that can be quietly resolved. Everything you built was constructed on the bodies of people you crushed. Like James Cooper. Like every other person Sterling Productions hurt and paid off and forgot about. I'm done running your playbook, Father. The Cooper boy again. He tried to sue Sterling Productions 12 years ago. We settled generously and he disappeared. Now he's resurfaced and manipulated you into this situation. He's out for revenge. James didn't manipulate anyone. He took a maintenance job because he needed health insurance after his wife died. He had no idea I was connected to Sterling Productions until after he was hired. And yes, I care about him. But that has nothing to do with Bradley's embezzlement. If you do this, if you call off this merger, if you report Bradley, if you pursue this relationship, you're no daughter of mine. The words should have devastated her. Instead, they felt like liberation. Then I guess I've been an orphan for a long time, Father. She hung up. Bradley stood frozen. The lawyers looked increasingly uncomfortable. Tom Morrison appeared in the doorway. Boss, you want these gentlemen escorted out? Please. And Tom? If Mr. Morrison attempts to enter this building again, call the police. This isn't over. I have connections, resources. It's already over.
You just haven't accepted it yet. Tom and his security team guided the three men toward the elevators. Catherine stood alone in her office, the morning sun finally breaking through Cleveland's clouds. Lisa reappeared. I need you to set up an emergency board meeting. This afternoon if possible, tomorrow morning at the latest. Full attendance required. And contact our corporate attorneys. Tell them to prepare a complete separation agreement from Morrison Investment Partners and documentation for filing with the SEC.
Boss, are you sure about this? Going to war with Bradley and your father simultaneously, you could lose everything. I'm sure. Because if I don't do this now, I never will. And I'd rather lose everything fighting for something that matters than keep it all by compromising everything I claim to value. Lisa smiled. Then let's burn it down properly. The hours before the board meeting blurred together. Lawyers arrived with documents. Lisa coordinated communications. Tom Morrison gathered security footage of Bradley accessing financial systems he shouldn't have reached. At 2 in the afternoon, James called. Catherine, what's happening? Lisa said there's an emergency board meeting. Are you okay? I will be. One way or another. I just needed to hear your voice before I walk into that room. Do you want me there? No. This is something I have to do alone. But James, when this is over, whatever happens, I need you to know that choosing to tell the truth about Bradley isn't about you. It's about me. About finally becoming the person I should have been all along. I know. And whatever happens, you're not alone. Mia and I will be here when you're done. The board assembled at 3 o'clock. 12 members, 7 men, 5 women, ranging in age from 48 to 73. Old money and new tech fortunes, real estate dynasties and venture capital empires. Robert Hayes sat at the far end of the table, his presence a violation of the retirement agreement he'd signed 3 years ago. His silver hair gleamed under the recessed lighting, and those distinctive eyes, the same winter blue as Catherine's, tracked her every movement. Catherine stood at the head of the table, presentation remote in hand, her crimson suit chosen deliberately. She clicked through the evidence methodically. Bradley Morrison has been embezzling from his own firm. $42 million hidden through offshore accounts. The merger I've been pursuing wasn't about creating a strategic powerhouse. It was about giving him access to our accounts to hide his theft. Margaret Chen, the oldest member at 73, spoke first. These are serious allegations, Catherine. Have you verified this independently? Our forensic accountants have spent the last 12 hours confirming every transaction. We're prepared to file a complete report with the SEC, but I wanted the board to understand why I'm terminating both the engagement and the merger before news breaks publicly. James Bradford leaned forward. This puts us in a difficult position. We've committed significant resources to integration planning. Our stock price has risen 12% in anticipation. Backing out now will raise questions about our due diligence and leadership judgment. Robert saw his opening. My daughter's personal feelings are clouding her judgment. Yes, Bradley made questionable decisions, but they can be addressed quietly. Walking away from a $200 million deal because of cold feet about marriage is the real scandal. This isn't about cold feet. This is about protecting Hayes Development from a con artist who saw us as his escape route from prison. Or it's about protecting your new relationship. Robert's voice dripped acid. Let's address the elephant in the room. He pulled up images, security footage of Catherine and James talking by the piano, sitting together in the empty lobby late at night. Nothing inappropriate, but framed through a certain lens, they suggested impropriety. This man is James Cooper. 12 years ago, he tried to sue Sterling Productions for injuries sustained due to his own negligence on stage. We settled generously, $75,000, and he disappeared. Now he's resurfaced, worked his way into my daughter's building as maintenance staff, and manipulated her into this situation. That's a lie. Catherine's voice rang clear and cold. James didn't manipulate anyone. He took a maintenance job 3 years ago because he needed health insurance after his wife died of cancer. He had no idea I was connected to Sterling Productions until after he was hired. And yes, I care about him. But that has nothing to do with the $42 million Bradley stole. Everything has to do with everything. Robert moved around the table. You want to know why James Cooper is really here? Because he sees an opportunity. A lonely CEO with too much money. He played you a song, told you a sad story, and now you're willing to destroy everything to play savior. James Cooper wrote Embers and Stars. Catherine's words fell into shocked silence. The song my first love supposedly composed for me before he died. Michael Bennett started it, wrote the first 8 bars, but couldn't finish. A scholarship student named James Cooper completed it without taking credit because he loved me from a distance and wanted me to have something beautiful, even if I never knew it came from him. Robert's expression flickered. That's impossible. Dr. Thomas Wright confirmed it. James Cooper was there at the Berkshires camp in 2008. He wrote that song. And 12 years ago, your cost-cutting at Sterling Productions destroyed his career when substandard equipment you personally approved crushed his hand during a performance. We paid him $75,000 to cover $68,000 in medical bills. You ruined his life for a $300,000 contract and a quarterly profit margin. The board members shifted uncomfortably. Margaret Chen cleared her throat. Catherine, I appreciate your honesty, but your father raises a valid concern. How do we know your judgment isn't compromised? Because I'm bringing you evidence, not emotions, not personal vendetta, financial records that any forensic accountant would recognize as fraud. If I were acting on emotion, I'd have quietly canceled the wedding and buried Bradley's crimes. Instead, I'm exposing everything and accepting whatever consequences follow. That's not compromised judgment. That's integrity. Integrity doesn't pay dividends. Robert played his final card. And sentimentality doesn't build empires. You didn't raise me. You trained me like you'd train a weapon. Catherine's voice didn't rise. But weapons can think for themselves, Father. And this one is done being wielded. The vote took 30 minutes. Catherine waited in her office, watching snow begin to fall again outside her window. When the call came to return, she walked in with her spine straight and her head high. Margaret Chen delivered the verdict. The board votes 7-5 to support your decision to terminate the Morrison merger and report Bradley Morrison's activities to appropriate authorities. We affirm your position as CEO. Catherine's knees weakened with relief she didn't let show. However, we're requiring enhanced financial oversight for the next 18 months, monthly audits, complete transparency, and full documentation regarding your relationship with Mr. Cooper. This company cannot afford even the appearance of compromised leadership. Understood. Robert stood abruptly. 2 board members who'd voted against Catherine followed him. This is a mistake. When the stock price tanks and investors flee, don't come crying to me to fix it. He walked out without another word. The remaining board members dispersed. When the room finally emptied, Catherine sat in her father's old chair and let herself shake. Tom Morrison found her there 10 minutes later. Boss, we've got Bradley Morrison in custody downstairs. FBI showed up with a warrant based on the evidence you provided. Turns out the SEC had been investigating his firm for months. Your documentation gave them everything they needed. So he was already under investigation, and he still tried to threaten me? Desperate men do stupid things. He probably thought marrying you was his only way out. When you started asking questions,
he panicked.
The days that followed felt like walking through fog. News of Bradley's arrest broke within hours. Catherine's stock price dropped 11% the first day, another 7% the second. 3 major investors pulled their positions. The wedding that was supposed to happen in 5 weeks became a punchline in financial blogs. Cleveland's ice queen left at the altar by white-collar criminal. But beneath the public humiliation, Catherine felt something unexpected. Relief. The constant low-level anxiety she'd carried for months finally had a name. Her instincts had been correct. James called every evening after Mia went to sleep. They talked about nothing important, what Mia was learning in piano lessons, whether the radiator in his apartment needed replacing, the weather turning colder. Conversations that felt more intimate than any Catherine had shared with Bradley in 6 months of engagement. On the 4th night, he asked the question she'd been expecting. Are you going to lose your job? Maybe. The board gave me 18 months to prove I can rebuild investor confidence. If I can't, they'll push me out. Would that be the worst thing? The question surprised her. Losing the company? Yes, it would hurt. This place is everything I've worked for since I graduated Stanford. But I think staying on as CEO after proving I'm just like my father would have been worse. Compromising on this would have destroyed something I didn't even know I still had. What's that? The belief that some things matter more than winning. I spent 18 years building an empire on my father's foundation without questioning what that foundation was made of. You, people like you, sacrificed for profit margins and quarterly earnings. If I'd married Bradley to save the merger, if I'd covered up his fraud, I would have become Robert Hayes. And I'd rather lose everything than become him. 2 weeks after the board meeting, Lisa appeared in Catherine's office with news that the SEC had formally charged Bradley with 19 counts of wire fraud, money laundering, and securities violations. He'd been denied bail after attempting to board a private plane to the Cayman Islands. There's something else. Julia Martinez called. The cellist James saved 12 years ago. Catherine's attention sharpened. She's a professor at Juilliard now. Read about the board meeting in the Wall Street Journal, saw James's name mentioned. She wants to testify about the Sterling Productions accident if it helps. What case? The board already voted. Not that case. Julia's been in touch with 3 other performers injured by Sterling Productions cost-cutting between 2010 and 2012. They all signed NDAs like James, all got settlements that barely covered medical bills. Julia thinks you could reopen those cases, get real compensation for the people your father's company hurt. Catherine felt something shift in her chest. What would that mean for Hayes Development? Could be significant. Maybe 20 to 30 million in settlements. Your insurance won't cover it because of the fraud and concealment. It would come straight out of operating capital. Catherine thought about the board's mandate. The investors already skittish, the stock price still recovering. Reopening old negligence cases would torpedo any chance of stability, would almost certainly cost her the CEO position. Set up a meeting with Julia and the other performers. I want to hear their stories directly. Boss, you understand this could I understand. Get me their medical records, their settlement agreements, everything Sterling Productions made them sign. And contact our litigation team. Tell them to prepare for settlement negotiations, not defense. We're not fighting these people. We're making them whole. That evening, Catherine met James and Mia at a diner on Cleveland's east side. The vinyl booths were cracked, the coffee weak, the fluorescent lights harsh. Mia sat between them, working on math homework with fierce concentration. James watched Catherine push eggs around her plate. You're thinking too loud. I'm about to make a decision that will probably cost me my job. Julia Martinez contacted me.
She wants to testify about the Sterling Productions accident, help reopen cases for other performers who were injured. If I pursue it, if I authorize settlements, Hayes Development will take a massive financial hit. The board will force me out. My father will use it as proof that I'm unfit to lead. Everything I've built will be gone. But you're going to do it anyway. Why? Because keeping it would require becoming someone I can't live with. Catherine looked at Mia, the girl's dark curls bent over her homework. Your daughter asks me sometimes what it's like to be in charge of a whole building.
I always tell her it means making sure everyone inside is safe and treated fairly. But I've been lying. I've been in charge of a company built on making sure people like you weren't treated fairly. If I keep that company by continuing those practices, what kind of person does that make me? The kind who survives. The kind who keeps a roof over her head and employees paid. That's not nothing, Catherine. But survival at what cost? If the price of keeping my position is staying silent about what my father did to you and Julia and everyone else Sterling Productions hurt, then maybe I don't deserve the position. Mia looked up from her homework.
Miss Catherine, are you sad?
A little bit, sweetheart. But sometimes sad is better than pretending everything's okay when it isn't. My mama used to say that. She said being honest hurt sometimes, but lying hurt longer. Your mama was very smart. The meeting with Julia Martinez happened 3 days later at a coffee shop in Ohio City. The cellist arrived exactly on time. 31 years old now, but carrying herself with poise. She was tall, striking, with long black hair pulled back in a practical bun. 2 other performers accompanied her. A violinist named Marcus Webb, who'd suffered hearing damage from faulty sound equipment, and a soprano named Claire Donovan, whose vocal cords had been damaged by asbestos exposure in a Sterling Productions rehearsal space. They each told their stories with careful control. Julia described the moment before James pushed her clear, the sound of metal groaning, the shadow falling, the impact that would have killed her if not for a stranger's reflexes. Marcus talked about the tinnitus that ended his solo career, the constant ringing, the settlement of $42,000 that barely covered audiologist appointments. Claire's voice shook, describing the burning sensation during rehearsals. The doctors who diagnosed scarring from prolonged asbestos exposure. The surgeries that saved her voice, but changed its range forever. Catherine listened without interrupting, making notes that became less about legal liability and more about human cost. What do you want? Not from me as CEO or as Robert Hayes's daughter, but from me as the person who has the power to make this right. What would right even look like? Julia exchanged glances with Marcus and Claire. We want the truth told. The NDAs voided so we can talk about what happened. And we want fair compensation, not just medical bills, but the careers we lost, the opportunities that disappeared, the futures that got stolen because someone decided our safety was worth less than their profit margin. She paused. James told me what you did at the board meeting, how you blew up a merger and stood up to your father. That took courage. This is the same thing, just harder, because it's your own history you're exposing instead of someone else's crimes. Catherine pulled out her phone and called Lisa, putting it on speaker. Lisa, I need you to contact our litigation team. Tell them we're settling all outstanding Sterling Productions negligence cases. Full compensation for lost earnings, medical expenses past and future, and punitive damages equivalent to what we should have paid 12 years ago, adjusted for inflation. No NDAs on the new settlements. People are free to tell their stories. And I want a public statement prepared acknowledging Sterling Productions' negligence and my father's role in prioritizing profit over safety. Boss, the board will...
I know what the board will do, but this is the right thing, and I'm done letting fear of losing my position prevent me from doing what's right. Prepare the documents. Schedule a press conference for Monday. You couldn't get rid of me with a crowbar.
I've been waiting 3 years for you to be this person instead of the ice queen your father wanted. Worth losing a job over. The call ended. Catherine looked at the 3 performers across the table. It won't be fast, and lawyers will make it complicated. But you have my word that Hayes Development will make this right. Julia's eyes filled with tears she didn't let fall. Thank you. Not just for me, but for James. He never asked for anything, never complained, just kept his head down and survived. He deserves someone fighting for him for once. The press conference happened on a Monday morning, exactly 1 week later. She stood at a podium in Hayes Development's lobby, the same space where James had played piano on Christmas Eve. Reporters filled the marble hall, cameras recording every word. Catherine wore navy instead of her usual crimson. Her prepared statement was brief. 2 minutes, acknowledging Sterling Productions' negligence, announcing the settlement fund for injured performers, and accepting personal responsibility. Between 2010 and 2012, Sterling Productions prioritized profit over people. Cost-cutting measures resulted in unsafe working conditions that injured multiple performers, some permanently. These individuals were pressured to sign inadequate settlements and NDAs that prevented them from seeking proper justice. As Robert Hayes' daughter and the current CEO of Hayes Development, I accept responsibility for my failure to investigate these practices and for benefiting from a company built partially on this foundation. She paused. Effective today, Hayes Development is establishing a $30 million fund to properly compensate all individuals harmed by Sterling Productions' negligence. We are voiding all previous NDAs and encouraging people to share their stories without fear of legal retaliation. And I am implementing new safety protocols and oversight procedures to ensure this never happens again under my leadership. A reporter shouted a question. Ms. Hayes, critics say you're destroying shareholder value to protect your relationship with James Cooper, one of the injured performers. How do you respond? James Cooper saved a young woman's life and lost his career because of Sterling Productions' negligence. He deserved better than he got 12 years ago. So did Julia Martinez and Marcus Webb and Claire Donovan and everyone else who suffered. My personal feelings don't change the facts of what happened or the moral obligation to make it right. She met the reporter's eyes directly. If doing the right thing costs me my position, then perhaps I wasn't suited to hold it. The board called an emergency meeting for that afternoon. Catherine walked into the conference room expecting termination papers. Instead, she found Margaret Chen alone at the table. They sent me to deliver the message. The board is deeply concerned about the financial impact of your settlement fund and the public relations implications. Several members believe you've compromised Hayes Development's interests to satisfy personal obligations. Catherine nodded, accepting the criticism. However, several other members, myself included, believe you've demonstrated exactly the kind of leadership Hayes Development needs if we're going to survive in an era where corporate ethics actually matter to investors. The settlement fund will hurt short-term, yes, but our insurance will cover more than you think once we file claims properly. And early polling suggests your transparency is playing well with the ESG investment community. She slid a document across the table. The board is offering you a new contract. Same position, same authority, but with explicit provisions that you maintain the ethical standards you established today. We're betting that honesty and accountability will prove more valuable long-term than the profit maximization model your father championed. What changed? Last month you were threatening to remove me. Nothing changed. You showed us who you actually are, instead of who your father trained you to be. Some board members hate it. 2 resigned this morning. But the rest of us think Hayes Development might actually be worth more led by Catherine Hayes than by Robert Hayes's puppet. 6 months later, on a warm June evening, James stood in the small rehearsal space he'd opened with part of his settlement from Hayes Development. Cooper Music Center occupied an old warehouse in Ohio City, the exposed brick and high ceilings perfect for acoustics. 30 students from low-income families attended classes twice a week, learning piano and violin and music theory from James and 2 other instructors, both former Sterling Productions performers grateful for work. Mia sat at a piano near the window, working through a simplified arrangement of Embers and Stars that James had transcribed for her level. She played with fierce concentration, her small hands stretching for chords that would come easier in a few years when she grew into her reach. Catherine arrived as the sun angled through industrial windows, painting everything gold. She'd come straight from the office, still in her work clothes, navy suit, heels that clicked on the concrete floor, but she'd loosened her hair from its usual bun. "How was the board meeting?" "Productive. We closed 2 new development projects, both with explicit environmental and labor protections built into the contracts. Profit margins are lower than my father would have accepted, but long-term sustainability is higher. And our ESG rating jumped 12 points, which is attracting the kind of investors who actually care about how we make money instead of just how much." She paused, watching Mia play.
I also got a call from Robert.
Catherine hadn't spoken to her father since the board meeting 6 months ago, their relationship severed as cleanly as a surgical cut. His voice on the phone that morning had sounded older, diminished somehow. What did he want? To tell me I'm destroying his legacy, that the settlement fund was financial suicide and the new ethics policies will make Hayes Development uncompetitive. And what did you say? That his legacy was built on breaking people, and I'd rather destroy it than continue it. He hung up. I don't think he'll call again. I'm sorry. Don't be. I spent 36 years trying to earn Robert Hayes's approval, and the only thing it got me was a company built on suffering and an engagement to a criminal. Losing his respect was the price of finding my own. A small recital was scheduled for the following week, Cooper Music Center's first public performance, 30 students showcasing what they'd learned in 6 months.
When Catherine arrived on the evening of the performance, slipping into a back row seat as parents and siblings filled the folding chairs, no one paid her particular attention. She was just another adult there to support a child's achievement, anonymous in a way she hadn't been in years. Mia played fourth in the program, her small frame approaching the piano with visible nervousness. She wore a blue dress Catherine had helped her pick out at Macy's, not designer, just nice, and her dark curls were pulled back with clips that kept sliding loose. She sat at the bench, adjusted the height with careful precision James had taught her, and placed her hands on the keys. The piece she played was simple, a basic arrangement of Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, with embellishments James had added to make it more interesting. But Mia played it with such earnest concentration, such determination to get every note right, that Catherine felt tears threaten. This was what James had lost when Sterling Productions' negligence crushed his hand. Not just the ability to perform, but the joy of creating something beautiful from nothing. When Mia finished, the applause was genuine and warm. The girl beamed, taking a small bow the way James had taught her, and Catherine understood why he'd chosen teaching over the pursuit of surgery that might restore his abilities. This mattered more, passing forward what he'd learned, helping children find their voices through music. James played last after all 30 students had performed. He'd resisted at first, but they'd begged him to demonstrate what practice could achieve. He sat at the piano Catherine had donated, a refurbished Steinway that cost more than his annual salary, but made his students' eyes light up. He chose Embers and Stars, the complete version he and Michael had created 18 years ago. The damaged tissue of his right hand moved more slowly than it once would have. The technical precision compromised by nerve damage that no surgery would fully repair. But what he lacked in speed, he compensated for with emotional depth. Each note weighted with 18 years of patience and loss and love that had finally found its voice. Catherine listened to the song that had defined so much of her life, the song she'd believed was Michael's gift, but had actually been James's silent declaration, and felt something fundamental shift. The melody no longer carried grief for what she'd lost, but gratitude for what she'd found. The boy who'd written it was gone, but the man who'd completed it sat 10 feet away, playing for an audience of parents and children who had no idea they were witnessing something that had taken 18 years to reach this moment. When the music ended, James stood and gestured to his students, all 30 of them crowding onto the small stage, their faces glowing with shared achievement. Catherine applauded until her hands hurt, and no one in that room knew she was a CEO, or that her father had destroyed the man who'd just played, because none of that mattered here. What mattered was the music and the children and the possibility of second chances. After the recital, after parents had collected their children and congratulations had been offered and equipment had been packed away, Catherine and James walked along the lakefront. Mia had gone home with Julia Martinez. The cellist had become an unofficial aunt, taking Mia to museums and concerts and giving Catherine and James rare time alone. The June evening was perfect, warm without being humid, the kind of night that made Cleveland winters almost forgivable. They walked in comfortable silence. I got a job offer. The Cleveland Conservatory.
They want me to direct their community outreach program, full-time, with benefits. Better pay than Cooper Music Center generates. More stability for Mia. That's wonderful. You'd be amazing at that. I turned it down. The Cooper Music Center isn't about making money or building a career. It's about creating something that wouldn't exist otherwise. Those 30 kids, half of them would never touch an instrument if we charged market rates for lessons. The conservatory wants me to expand their scholarship program, which is good work, but it's not the same as what we're building in Ohio City. Catherine understood what he wasn't saying, that some things mattered more than security or prestige, that the boy who'd washed dishes to afford music camp had grown into a man who measured success differently than quarterly earnings or titles. What would you do if you had to choose between growing Hayes Development into a national firm or keeping it regional but ethical? Between profit and principle? I don't have to choose. I already chose. Every day I stay committed to the new ethics policies is another day choosing principle over profit. And you know what I discovered? They're not actually incompatible. We're making less money than we could if we cut corners, yes. But we're making enough, and I can sleep at night. And I'm building something I'm actually proud of instead of something I'm just good at. She paused, watching sailboats glide across the lake in the dying light. Real power isn't crushing people to get what you want. It's having the courage to choose truth, even when lies would be easier. They stood together, watching the sun sink below the horizon, painting the Cleveland skyline in shades of amber and rose. Catherine thought about the 18 years she'd spent frozen at 18, mourning a boy who'd written half a song, building walls around the softest parts of herself, because grief felt safer than hope. And she thought about James, who'd spent those same 18 years loving her from the shadows, giving her pieces of his heart without ever asking for anything back. The song we wrote together, the one that started with Michael's 8 notes and your completion, it's not finished. Even after 18 years, even after tonight's recital, it still feels like there should be more. Maybe that's the point. Maybe the best songs are the ones that keep being written, that grow and change as the people who made them grow and change. We're not the same people we were at 18. The song shouldn't be the same either. He turned to face her, the last rays of sunset catching in his gray-green eyes. What if we wrote a second movement, not to replace embers and stars, but to continue it? Show where the story went after the embers cooled and the stars faded. Show what happened when two people found each other across 18 years and impossible odds. I'd like that. Writing something together instead of apart this time. They walked back toward Ohio City as full dark settled over Cleveland, the city lights creating new constellations against the summer night. Mia would be home soon, full of stories about whatever adventure Julia had taken her on. Hayes Development would open tomorrow, the board expecting updates on quarterly projections and new development proposals. Life would continue with all its ordinary demands and complications. But tonight, walking beside a man who'd loved her long enough to see her become someone worth loving back, Catherine felt something she hadn't felt since she was 18 years old. The certainty that tomorrow held possibility instead of just obligation. That the future could be written instead of merely survived. That two people with broken pieces could create something whole if they were brave enough to try. Above them, summer stars emerged one by one, distant and patient as they'd always been, waiting for the embers of old grief to cool completely and make room for new light.